Okay, welcome back. We have something more interesting than coffee coming after this panel. We have the misfortune to be the last, but then that's also an opportunity to be very brief and to finish early. We have a very interesting and diverse group here, and we'll be addressing, as we were talking just before the beginning of this panel, we'll be addressing citizen rights from very different perspectives. And as we have just discussed before the coffee break, there are so many practical aspects of it. Some of them not visible, not recognized, for example, as somebody mentioned, in the media, not immediately known to European citizens, but things which are affecting their everyday lives. I can't stop myself from sharing with you an example of how something which is considered the typical EU bureaucratic shortcoming has become a strong asset for a civil society organization. And an example that I came across in Copenhagen. I don't know if you've seen this restaurant in the old town, which is given to an NGO, and it uses only the food access. So these famous cucumbers which have the wrong shape, these ugly looking carrots, all of that which has to be thrown away because the EU directives don't allow it to be sold, which is of course not true, but it's a part of the mythology of the European Union. So this Danish NGO has signed a contract with some of the big chains that sell vegetables and food across Copenhagen, and they receive for free all that stuff to cook with. And apart from the chef, everybody else in the kitchen is a volunteer. So you can sign up, and there is a long waiting list of volunteers to be waiters for a day, or a bartender for a day, or a wash disher for a day, who knows. So something which comes at no cost to the NGO and is sold at the regular, quite serious Danish restaurant prices, and all the revenues go to a charity which helps migrants, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Danish Refugee Council, actually, the organization which is running the restaurant. So I thought that was a very inventive idea of a social enterprise. Could we call it a social enterprise? A social enterprise which benefits from the negative mythology of the EU and this typical wrong-shaped cucumber, an ugly tomato, an ugly carrot, and so on. So this panel is about how citizen organizations in different countries approach such issues as social entrepreneurship, and how can civic engagement and social entrepreneurship contribute to tapping the potential of EU citizens. And we have participants from Spain, from Albania, from Civil Society Europe, from the Young European Federalists, and from the Future Lab. We start with Aida Barquero, who is the project manager of Fundación Ciudadanía. Sorry. They are EU Impact partner, part of this current project, and they had a very interesting, I think, initiative and debate on civic education, including a panel which I was very much interested in, which was about media literacy and the way media can undermine, or poor understanding of the media can undermine civil engagement. So, Aida, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon again. Well, it is a pleasure for us, for Fundación Ciudadanía, to participate in the final conference of EU Impact. Thanks to, as Petko and Asha explained this morning, thanks to this great project, we were able to organize 9 great national webinars. And as Petko just said, the Spanish event was held in January in Mérida, Spain, where Fundación Ciudadanía is based. And we enjoyed a fabulous debate. Among others, we discussed the importance of linking formal and non-formal educational activities at universities and schools, just following that idea that I introduced as a member of the public, in order to promote that citizen participation that we're looking for. Well, for instance, through our Estonian partner, we discovered an example of non-formal educational activity promoted by Estonian high schools and universities. The Arvamus Festival, the Opinion Festival of Estonia, which takes place every summer. The Opinion Festival is a place to exchange ideas on the organization of society, to get fresh ideas and new insights. Well, the most interesting part of that is now Fundación Ciudadanía and our Cypriot partner, the Cypriot partner of U Impact, are preparing in our countries, in Cyprus and Cyprus and in Spain, a similar festival. So in that way, transfer of knowledge works. I mean, these European projects are just a little piece, and the thing is that if we work hard, we can take that shared ideas from our partners and we can try to do them in our countries. And as Petko said, now in this panel, we'll also I'm going to talk about the social entrepreneurs. I'll bring some Spanish experiences. Well, we already had the opportunity to listen to the interesting idea of Carles Cervera, of that kind of social entrepreneur project. And following that educational tool, that non-formal educational tool, I would like to share with you Fácil Lectura, in English, easy reading, was born through an employment shuttle and solidarity venture that was targeted at women, young women, well, most of them unemployed young women. And that employment shuttle was promoted by my organization, by Fundación Ciudadanía, and in it participated 3 young women who now they are partners in a social cooperative called Dile Lectura Fácil, easy reading, and I like to add for everyone, easy reading for everyone. Well, which is the aim of this project? So, as you more or less can guess, is to create a more sustainable and inclusive society and opportunities for everyone by meeting the needs of people with disabilities and or at risk of social exclusion. Well, so why do we need that service? Because as Petko said, sometimes we need that volunteers, that people to cover that lack of participation by our institutions and governments. Well, just to share with you some figures, about 30% of the population, of the EU population, have reading difficulties. Access to reading is a social necessity and a right recognized, as all of us know, by various national and international legal texts, such as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities of the United Nations. And well, and of course, in terms of leisure, reading is a pleasure for sharing ideas, thoughts, and experiences. And well, all of us have that right. So this project wants to support special educational needs. The program is addressed to people with disabilities, immigrants, people with limited access to formal education, and people who suffer communication disorders. So, as we said, formal and non-formal education can work together. In fact, they need to work together, and we don't have to see that as extra activity that, well, you can do if you have time. They need to work together. And just as a kind of reivindication, not everything is positive, because, well, we had that great idea of that social cooperative that came from that employment shuttle. But the thing is that only 5% of all published books in the developed countries are ever produced in accessible formats. So for us, from in Fundación Ciudadanía and for all this partnership of EU Impact, it produces a profound indignation that 7 EU member states have formed a minority bloc which is impeding the process of ratifying the Treaty of Marrakech. That what it wants is to change that reality, to make public all these different formats. Because the thing is that all materials and resources built by by Lectura Fácil, that social cooperative, are following some guidelines based on the International Federation of Library Associations and Institutions. Well, but however, all these efforts will not have the desired impact without the support of EU institutions. The thing is that we cannot demand a participatory citizenship if the institutions don't provide citizens with the right tools. So that little reivindication that we make from here is that, well, we would like to know how the EU institutions intend to make good the EU obligations under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities by promptly removing the unnecessary obstacles to ratify for the ratification of that treaty, of Marrakech Treaty. Because, well, the thing is that if we have good ideas, but we don't have more support from EU institutions, we cannot get that EU impact, that real impact that we're looking for. And just another example of social entrepreneurs projects in Spain is participation, innovation, and social entrepreneurship for local development. Well, in Spanish is participación, innovación, emprendimiento social, which forms PS, that means fit in Spanish. So it's a kind of, the slogan, the idea is a kind of fit to keep on walking by transforming lives in towns. The Badajoz Provincial Council launches a pilot project in order to promote innovation and social entrepreneurship. And the objective is to achieve a local development that promotes the creation of social entrepreneurs. And, well, through a team of experts that is coordinated by Fundación Ciudadanía.
2 last minutes, Ada.
Well, I'll get there. And, well, just to share with you, the aim of that project is to encourage new young graduates to create job opportunities in the rural environment, because the thing is that we need to transform the lives in the countryside. The program is supported by public and private entities that seek to construct social innovation ecosystems. And, well, just an example, we'd like to bring the experience of a young participant who, after studying a master's in organic farming, developed the idea of creating social organic gardens. And, well, he told us that thanks to agroecology, we can now join the ancient techniques, because we don't have to forget what works well. We don't need to change everything. And of planting along with the modern techniques. In Fundación Ciudadanía, now we are creating an informative manual just to encourage new entrepreneurs to follow, to be part of the second edition of this kind of shuttle employment. And, well, just to show some of our partners are in Nexus, Social and Tech. There is also an NGO called Cambiar el Mundo, which helps that young social entrepreneurs. And, well, as the aim of this panel was also to well, to introduce some EU tools that we could use. We had a nice experience with Erasmus for Young Entrepreneurs, which is a good instrument for that young entrepreneurs that they feel a bit alone in their countries. They can collaborate with experienced entrepreneurs from other EU countries, and in that way, I think that is a kind of, they receive a kind of grant, and through that they can be in that experienced company for 6-8 months, and through that they can get that confidence that sometimes there is a lack of confidence, and they can get that confidence and build that social entrepreneurships, because sometimes if being an entrepreneur is difficult, sometimes being a social entrepreneur is even more difficult. So it's a kind of tool to encourage them. So thank you for your time, and just to a kind of positive message. We have to remember that we don't have to dream our life, and we can be. So let's be creative, let's be social entrepreneurs, and live our dreams. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Rita.
Just 1 second. The thing is that I have to fly because I have a flight to catch, and now we know the controls that there are more controls. And now, after this panel, we're gonna show with that we have these great photographs that show us some examples of citizen participation. You can see all of them in this room. And besides that, we have some videos from, all U Impact partners shared some videos that could help us to describe what is citizen participation. And from Spain, we want to share 3 videos. In one of them, you'll see. I'm providing you with that description, just to be sure that you will more or less follow that video story. Well, you'll see several volunteers from my hometown, Gandia, which is located in the south of Valencia. And well, it is related to the refugees in Syria. Last month, some volunteers from my hometown traveled to Idomeni to give the clothes and food collected through a campaign that was organized by some local and regional associations. And this is you'll see there is a kind of video to say thanks for all of that efforts, that local and regional efforts. And well, you will see how volunteers are introducing all the material collected into a container. And it is a short video, and then you'll see how 2 weeks after the container arrives to Idomeni, it was in April, and volunteers distribute that materials among the refugees. And they are nice videos, and yeah, especially because they show a very nice volunteer job. And the last one is related to El 15M, the Spanish Revolution. Just 5 years later, you see that that this movement is still alive. And in this video shows, well, a fact that started 5 years ago. It is called it is the Spanish Spring, and Los Indignados, the outraged citizens who sought a political and economical change. Well, they gathered together in assemblies, and spontaneous assemblies at the streets, in public squares, in order to demand a change. And well, 5 years later, we're still looking for that change, and that's why this movement is still alive. And we think that it is a nice example. And well, there are English subtitles, so the message will arrive to all of you. Thank you for your time, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon.
Thank you, Rita. Ariola Agol is Director of Programs at Partners Albania for Change and Development, and their debate, their issues were also related to social enterprises. So, Ariola, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Petko. Marta, please, can you? Hello, everybody. My name is Ariola, as Petko already introduced me. I work as the Director of Programs for Partners Albania. Is an Albanian organization, local one, but we are member of a bigger network, of a global network of 20 centers all around the globe, which mission is the advancements of society in the countries in transition. This was also the aim of the organizations when we founded it in 2001, and our main area of work since that time and to nowadays is related to increase citizen participation in decision making and policy making, and create more access and a more enabling environment for civil society organizations in order for the country to be more democratic and governed better. In this framework, in the last years, we have been working very much on not only for capacity building of the civil society organizations and legal framework, but also for the to support these organizations, but also groups of citizens in their initiatives and innovative ideas to create social entrepreneurship. Related to the not only to this panel but also to the panels before, especially to the values of European citizenship. Although Albania is not a EU country, but we are just a candidate, and it was a great pleasure that we participated together with the partners in the EU Impact project. I can say that the experience was great, and we had the opportunity to exchange many ideas and also our experiences as candidate country with other EU member country. And I think this is an added value for the project, because it the all the national debates, the one in Albania, but also the three ones that we participated in and contributed with our experiences, were broadcasted, and they were followed by many citizens, and this was an opportunity for them to listen, let's say, to other experiences, and to have uh, to know about other countries which are EU countries, how the EU values and the EU access in rights in labor market, etc., is developed throughout the years. As I mentioned earlier, Partners Albania is working since some years for the social entrepreneurship development in Albania, and we are working through different, let's say, forms. One form is through seed funding support for startups of civil society organizations or active local citizens in local communities, especially in communities where marginalized groups are living and want to change their life. Uh, we are working through exchanges and cooperation among organizations and entrepreneurs, investors, and private sector at national and international level, through, let's say, involving these organizations and the people who created this social entrepreneurship in different conferences, international forums and debates, in order to give them a chance to share their experience, but also to learn from the others. We are working also for the facilitation of the dialogue with the state actors, because in Albania recently, also because we are a candidate country, and the government wants to fulfill a set of legal framework and criteria. They want to establish a very with rush laws and everything in order to fulfill the criteria, and this is not very very good and very healthy, because if it's not done with the citizen participation and if it's not done with let's say a consultation of local groups which have experiences in these things, then it can be really a mess. And this is also the case recently in Albania, where the government is starting to introduce a law on social entrepreneurship, and will pass it soon in the parliament, even though we are really in the first step of this development, and we really need not to have laws that limit, but laws that gives more access and more liberty to these new entities to be developed. And yeah, and I will. How is it Spanish? You know? Okay. Okay, I'm going quickly just to show you some of the, in doing so, because we try to act as professionals. We did lots of research on social entrepreneurship initiatives in Albania, and then we continued with some education and awareness campaign, and as I told you, with capacity building and financial support. Uh, we are part of several networks, including Social Innovation Europe platform, and we have been part of different, let's say, projects at the European level, trying, as I already told you, to bring new experiences and models in Albania, and to educate to educate the people and to bring a European mentality of how the things are functioning in the EU countries. So for us, it's more easy to see these models and to adapt them based on our experience. I don't know. This is not functioning. Hmm? Some. Yeah, please. There. Okay. You pass. Yeah. Again. You pass again. Okay. And again. And again. Okay. I just wanted to introduce to you some of the social entrepreneurship, and then everything is also in our website, just to give you the one idea of what we have been doing so far. From 4 years in the framework of national competition and also regional one, because it's also organized at the Balkans level, we are organizing a green ideas competition. It is an annual competition that aims to serve as an incubator for small-scale green and social economic development ideas, utilizing local resources and revitalizing traditional production of community. And every year, people from local community or civil society organizations are competing with innovative ideas, and the criteria are that the ideas should be social, so the impact they should have a social impact, but also should be environmental friendly. And some of the best ideas, and I have to mention, and you can find further on, is, can you please, the next, is designed by Pana. Is a furnishing entrepreneurship. The architects that and that initiated this let's say social entrepreneurship do furniture for home, bar, restaurants, and offices through recycling of wooden pallets. And today they started with 2 people, and today they have 12 employees in 3 years, and all the employees are people coming out from orphanages after after the 18, or the pensioners or return immigrants. Other very interesting social entrepreneurship, the next one, is Albania Recycling Community, where Roma community is organized to, let's say, recycle everything, and they do the collection with bicycles in order to be environmental friendly. The next, please. Yeah, and there is another one, which is the Girocastra Foundation, aiming to to, let's say, develop further the traditions in Albania for handicrafts or for other things that women, unemployed women, can make and can contribute to the, let's say, to the community and to the tradition and to tourism development. This foundation, together with local community, started a social enterprise with, and they employed about 12 women and girls in poor condition, in poor living condition. I just wanted to end it up with some, because we are working a lot also in the awareness and the next one, please, and the next. Okay. We work a lot with as I told you, with advocacy on the issues that we are working on. And we organized for the education of the government, but also of the other stakeholders. We organized in the last 4 years many debates on social entrepreneurship development in order to bring international experiences, but also to suggest to the government what are the best models and how they should, let's say, support further the social entrepreneurship through the, as I already told you, through not imposing a law which is very strict, but a law which is more open, and to discuss the law before with the people and with local communities and organizations who are already working in this area. And of course, there is because social entrepreneurship is in the focus of many EU programs and projects. Is very good to coordinate with the international donors, but also agencies and civil society organizations in the country to, in order to further develop these initiatives that brings citizens more closely to the access in decision making, but also in economic empowerment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ariola.
For any further, please, the last slide, please. The last. Okay, these are my contacts, and Partners Albania is the organization, and we have a very updated website where everything is written down there. Thank you.
And all the links will be on the EU Impact website, which is uimpact.net. Thank you, Ariola. I think it's very nice to be reminded every now and then, among other things, about the transformative power of the EU, something that we sometimes forget discussing other problems that we are facing with every day, but Albania, and something that Flora touched upon during the previous panel, countries further away from the EU are looking at the EU, including from the perspective of rights as an example, and it's good to remember that the EU still has this great transformative power, the driver of change, of positive change across the world. Okay, and now we go to Carlotta Besozzi. She's coordinator for Civil Society Europe, and will be speaking about the civic space mapping in the EU.
Yes, thank you very much. So first of all, a very quick word about the Civil Society Europe. So Civil Society Europe is an organization which was born out of the European Year of Citizenship and out of the alliance that was formed. And it includes civil society organizations that work on citizenship, fundamental rights, social rights, culture, development, environment, and youth, and so on. And actually, I'm also here because ECAS is one of our founding members and also active in the steering committee. And I'm going to present a part of the work that we do as a very new organization. So we are working on the recognition of civil society organizations. We are working on civic space, and we are working on the implementation of civil dialogue in the EU, and notably about Article 11, beyond the ECI, really the part around civil dialogue, which is often a bit neglected by the EU institution. So I will just present the survey on civic space, which was the result of the work which is done by one of our working groups on civic space and fundamental rights, and we worked in cooperation with Civicus to prepare this survey, which is actually was an online survey which was launched and addressed to association and activists in the EU, but also accession countries, European Economic Area, and it was based on the national level. So national association could respond to this survey. And it was very quick. It was done in 2 months, so it's a first attempt. And what the survey aims to look at is really to have a sort of perception about civic space from this organization. So it's not nothing scientific. It's really how people active either in organization or in civic space perceive the situation in Europe. And so we had quite a lot of interest despite a few months, but we had 180 full responses, which were good because there were also a lot of open responses to questions, and around 20 questions. And we had answers from all the countries, but some countries in the EU, but some countries only a few. And we got highest responses from Hungary, Slovenia, and France. We had a good share of, was gender balanced, and then we had also a good. It doesn't. Yeah, you can see that also age-wise, it is quite balanced. So basically, the organizations that responded were in very different fields of civil society, and most of them were active at national level. I mean, all national organizations, but some of them were, for example, active also at international level. And you could also see that most of the organizations had more limited budget to operate, although there were a few organizations who even had over 1 million, and even a very few over $5 million turnover. Basically, there were a number of questions about civic space, about the health of democracy, and so on, you will see. So I will go through them. And we can see, for example, as regard the conditions for civil society and citizen action, that actually respondents are very much divided. So they were asked to assess the conditions in the last year, and you had 40% more or less which think that the conditions were not so good, were below average, and 40% which exactly the same amount which were above the average, and or 20% which are around the status quo. And actually what I noticed is that there was quite a difference between Western and Eastern European countries in this respect. There were questions about the condition for registration of associations, freedom of assembly and freedom of expression, which in general are quite positive. But the only thing, freedom of expression, there were around almost a third who expressed concern. There was a question about ability and willingness of the state to investigate abuses against the civil society organization sector, and over 40% considered that this was not so good, and actually there were quite a few on the average. And also a big worry is about financial support. So you have only 18% of respondents which consider that financial support for civil society is actually enough. And as I mentioned before, the perception changes between Western and Eastern Europe. And this is just a slide about the financial support to give you an idea. In terms of civic dialogue, the questions were around the civic space at local and regional and national level. And we could see that the satisfaction decreases as far as the level increases. So at national level, and regional level is definitely lower, where local level there is quite some satisfaction. And also, CSO felt very important to cooperate at a European level. It's very huge response. There were also a number of questions about what is the top issue of concern around civic space for organizations. So they are the two most important worries are funding restrictions and lack of adequate consultation processes, which these are the number organization could actually rank from first to eighth, and actually on the first, as a top issue, and second top issues, funding restriction and lack of adequate consultation processes come very strong. If you look at the younger participants, it's reversed order. And what comes also as a third issue is by all respondents is contract conditionality, and then followed very closely by counterterrorism measures. So although as a first issue, they are lower. And other issues that were mentioned by respondents was also the lack of civil society organization recognitions, the increasing social exclusion and discrimination, and also the threats by extremist groups.
2 minutes reminder.
Yeah, so I'm almost done. So the other issues related to the health of democracy in Europe. And what is positive is that over 60% consider that democratic principles are upheld in their country, although there was a variation from country to country. And but there were worries around access to government information that confirm the answer to the questions before. So people see in the last year either a status quo or worsening of the situation. And the same goes for the identification and reporting of corruption. There was also a question on how you forecast for the future civic space in Europe. And actually, as you can see, there is a tendency for decline of the situation of civic space in Europe. And I will just conclude with this slide. So, which was the issue of political trends in Europe. So you have 84% of respondents which see an increase in nationalism and discrimination against immigrants and ethnic minorities as a result of recent events like the refugee crisis. And also 63% agree that recent political developments have increased polarization between different sections of society. And also 73.6% consider that the support of the government to civil society in terms of promoting human rights and democratic values is not enough. And over 60% also want the youth to do more to guarantee civic space in their country, which was basically the findings of this survey. We are also looking at some case studies. We will have a full report later in June, but this was just to give you the idea. Again, it's nothing scientific, but it's a perception, and which is interesting to see, and we'll certainly, work on it and refine it in a further year, and hopefully we'll also have more respondents in order to make it more solid. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we move to a very interesting issue. In my country, which is not a member of Schengen, Bulgaria, there is a vast majority, I think something like 65–70% of the population want Bulgaria to join the Schengen, to become a part of the Schengen area, which is slightly less than the percentage of people who want our borders closed for refugees. So we are in this dual personality, disorder, and this is why I think it's quite refreshing to see somebody who says Schengen is mine and I want to keep it. So this is an intro to our next speaker, who is Ioan Bucura, Secretary General of the Young European Federalists. He's going to talk about the campaign "Don't Touch My Schengen."
Yes, thank you very much for having us here in this panel. Um, and for already introducing, I can already say a bit about myself. Being as a Romanian myself, I can fully relate to what you said, based at least on what our civil society organizations back home think. But here I'm in my quality as a European and as a federalist to present our campaign, Don't Touch My Schengen. Before I'll go to Don't Touch My Schengen, I'll just briefly say a few words about the Young European Federalists. The Young European Federalists are the oldest pro-European youth movement in Europe, with member sections in over 33 countries and over 30,000 members. Now, and coming specifically to this Don't Touch My Schengen campaign. Now, what we're experiencing at the moment is what we like to call and label as a multiple crisis. We all know that what started off as a financial crisis turned into a social crisis, and then later on we have the current migration and refugee crisis, which sparked heads of state to actually want to suspend the Schengen Agreement. What we then thought is that Schengen itself is one of the most important pillars that we've experienced historically in European integration. We didn't want to. Schengen has brought us so many things in terms of, just to give a brief example. Back in the day, when you would take a Finn and telling him that, or her, that they would actually be able to reside in Portugal and open their company or go to studies there or whatever they wanted to do, just to move freely across the continent. That was not possible. Now, the Young European Federalists militated for free movement long before the Schengen Agreement was even in place, and long before free movement was actually even available for Europeans, for the regular European citizen. Now, coming upon the Don't Touch My Schengen campaign itself, it had three different pillars, so to speak, or three different dimensions. One of them was a huge online campaign which was enabled through Thunderclap. I think some of you, or maybe most of you, have heard about Thunderclap, which enables users to sign simultaneously with their Facebook or Twitter or Tumblr account to have a specific message sent. So that was made for a specific date and hour, and then it went viral online to catch the eye and the attention about the importance of having the Schengen Agreement up and running. Needless to say, and coming back to the very first point that was mentioned by our moderator here, it's quite of a paradox that, especially in member states of the EU that are not in Schengen, and by that we mean Bulgaria and Romania, that really want to be in Schengen but are against the current wave of refugees, that also strikes another point that the Young European Federalists stand for, and that's a common security and defense mechanism with full respect, however, to asylum seekers and human rights and dignity. Now, coming back to the Don't Touch My Schengen, the second point was a letter which was signed by us and by 18 other pan-European youth NGOs. Not only the Young European Federalists signed that letter. That letter was addressed to Jean-Claude Juncker. That letter was addressed to Donald Tusk and to Martin Schulz. And we were happy that the three presidents actually reacted and replied to our response, that they are aware of this, and that the actions that are being taken are here basically they're very well aware of this issue, and they're trying to do their best to keep the heads of the member states to respect the accord and keep the Schengen Agreement alive. Another thing that this has touched upon basically was the fact that this was commonly signed also by the biggest youth platform, which is the European Youth Forum, but it was also signed by all the party political, or by the vast majority of the party political youth organizations. So Jeff Europe, as a non-partisan youth NGO, we are a political NGO because we stand for European federalism, but we're not party political. But we managed to make the conservatives, the socialists, the liberals, and the Greens to speak together in one voice and call upon the Schengen Agreement to stay in its place. Then here you can see on the Storify on the screens that we have here on the walls. Basically, this is a sum up of what we did. Here is, for instance, even like I said in the beginning of the presentation, our network has over 33 national sections, and they all did actions on the ground. So all our volunteers actually went on the ground. Here you can see, for instance, when Jeff Italy welcomed Matteo Renzi on the island of Ventotene, which has a specific, very special meaning for us, because that's where the Manifesto di Ventotene was written. As like that's our federalist Bible, so to speak. Just a small side note. Those are, as you can see on those are street actions, for instance, that were treated also by major press groups in Italy, in Germany. In Germany, our section blocked basically a bridge which was connecting Germany to Luxembourg. And they said, look, this is what happens if you suspend the Schengen Agreement. You will basically not be able to, you will have to have huge queues and so on. And I have to tell you that the bystanders there and the cars that were queuing to get into Luxembourg and into Germany actually were very thankful for our volunteers that they're doing such an action on the ground, because that raises awareness. And yeah, so basically those are the three dimensions that I've been talking about. The Thunderclap Online, which has had an outreach of over 1.5 million single users. Then we've had the common political voice, so for the party political youth organizations, the European Youth Forum, and other civil society youth organizations. And then we had a massive on the ground Schengen, which here you can see, for instance, in Denmark, in Germany, in Italy, in Norway. This was in the Czech Republic, and so forth. Now, what I can say is that in the end, this "Don't Touch My Schengen" campaign has been a major success, at least in terms of showing the importance of direct grassroots approach citizenship that can be done through the means of online tools and online campaigning and acting through your volunteer basis. So this campaign, needless to say, okay, it has been successful in terms of press releases, reaching out politically to the presidents, doing it online, but the real impact was also offline, on the ground, and that has been only manageable due to our volunteer hub. So this also shows the importance of activism, and hereby I will also conclude. And by underlining the importance of activism, what I'm saying is that people actually identify with people, with their fellow citizens, and with what they're doing, and not necessarily with complex treaties. But in order for the complex treaties and the mechanisms in which Europe is working, and that we can make and have a more democratic and fair and tolerant Europe, is through the means of those civil society organizations and their actions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now we are looking at how to get the young people involved. I understand that this will be one of the major perspectives that will be offered to this debate from Claire there. She's from the Future Lab Europe program, leader of the European Policy Center. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you to ECAS for the invitation. and for organizing this important event. So I will speak in my two functions because I'm having two hats at the moment. So I'm a senior policy analyst at the European Policy Center, which is a think tank, an independent think tank based here in Brussels, mainly working on employment and social affairs. But I'm also the program leader of this Future Lab Europe program. So some of you might know what Future Lab Europe is about, some others don't. So I will just say a few words about what the main objectives of this program are about. So this is indeed a program for young Europeans, with the main objective of trying to build a network of young people and trying to promote a debate on the future of Europe among the young generation, but also trying to provide a platform of discussions and exchanges between the young generation and policymakers, including EU leaders. So as part of this program, so we have a strong focus on the future of democracy and how to increase the participation of young people in societies and in our political system. And as part of our activities this year, so we launched our spring publication some weeks ago, so in last month, so in April, so called Bring Back the Citizens. And this publication that I don't have with me here, but which is available on our website, on the website of Future Lab Europe. So this publication is basically a collection of ideas and suggestions of young people on how to revive citizens' interest in democracy and how to reinvent our political system, which is facing growing distrust from EU citizens. So my intervention today will shed light on some of the ideas of this publication and put them on the table for debate, but also bring some additional ideas and move away a bit from the focus of this panel discussion, which is on social entrepreneurship, but trying to touch upon other aspects of EU citizenship. So to start with, I would like to share some observations with you. So we are certainly all aware of some common developments across the EU, but we still, I think, in Brussels tend to forget some of them because we are kind of in our bubble and in contact with a lot of people working in the EU institutions, but sometimes we don't realize so the difficulties on the ground and the realities on the ground. So one of the key observations is that there is this growing disconnect between citizens and their representatives. And that's something that is to be seen, I think, in every part of Europe. So we are seeing all these new political parties, the emergence of these new political forces, and some commentators have even talked about the crisis of Western democracies. I think that this is due to several reasons. First of all, some economic developments, the fact that there have been some losers and winners as a result of globalization, as a result of changes on the labor market. We see also that inequality is growing in most of the member states, and that the redistribution function of our member state is not as efficient as before. And when we look at survey, we see that this young generation is the first generation who believe that they won't be better off than the generation of their parents. So they don't really believe in social progress anymore. Besides economic reasons, we also see that there are some political reasons, that there is a growing distrust towards politics, towards mainstream political parties, and we see the emergence of anti-establishment forces, mass citizens movements. So, of course, some of them are stronger in some countries than others, but it's still a common trend across Europe. So this distrust is not really specific to the EU or to EU institutions or to the EU political model. It's really happening all across Europe, but there are some similarities in this movement. And one of the similarities is that in most of the cases, so young people are the core group of these movements. So I wouldn't really say that civic engagement is disappearing across Europe, because we see that young people are still very engaged in public debates, so are calling on governments, institutions to listen to their voice. It's very important for them to debate ideas, and yeah, they want to engage to shape their own future. But what is a reality, I think, is that the form that civic engagement has taken over recent years has changed. So it's not really civic engagement through trade unions or through traditional organizations. It's more civic engagement by taking to the streets or being involved in public debates online. And I think that the EU also has to take its role in this change and has to adjust to these changes. So, but what's the issue, and how does it relate, I mean, to the topic of today and to the topic of EU citizenship? I think that we have to remind ourselves that first, by introducing EU citizenship, so EU leaders wanted to promote the idea of having a European identity, because they considered it, the fact that having a European identity would be a kind of precondition for supporting the European project. But when we look at the reality and how this idea has been implemented on the ground, so we see that there is a kind of contradiction, or there is a kind of dichotomy between what EU leaders want to promote and then the implementation on the ground. So just to take an example, when we look at the debate about Brexit and what the UK is negotiating, so we see that there is a questioning of some of the key principles of the EU, like, for instance, the freedom of movement, or the anti-discrimination principle based on nationality. I also think that one of the reasons is also the absence of any European public space, of any European public sphere. What we see, and looking again at these mass citizens movements, we see that that civic engagement most of the time is happening at either the local or the national level, so that these movements are really constrained by national boundaries. So they focus on national issues and they don't really go cross-border, although I have again to repeat and to recognize that there are some similarities in these movements. We also have to recognize that there have been some very important initiatives undertaken by EU institutions to make these EU citizenship a reality. So we can think about the European Citizens Initiative, but also a program like Erasmus+. So I think that, yeah, we are facing a number of difficulties, of obstacles to make these EU citizenship a reality, but there are some solutions. And I think that we have to debate also and to put some new ideas on the table and to include young people in this debate on how to revive and to give sense to EU citizenship. Just I'm going to suggest some ideas for the debate, some courses of action for the future that are very important to me, or that are also considered by young people as a key avenue for reviving this EU citizenship. So first of all, and one of the recommendations of this Future Lab Europe program and of our last publication is that we have to create a truly European political culture at the European level, that having this accumulation of national political cultures is not sufficient, that we need really a truly European decision-making process. A second idea will be also to make progress on social policies, and here so I would like also to make the link with the topic of social entrepreneurship, because I think that social policies and creating some redistribution at the European level is also a key factor for creating identity and for creating identity at the European level. So I think that there are plenty of instruments that will need to be further explored. So I'm thinking, for instance, here on the unconditional basic income that could also provide support for young entrepreneurs in Europe and enable them to initiate social projects without worrying about how to make these projects, how to make ends meet. Another idea would be also to increase, and which is very important if we want the EU to be a kind of global setter in democracies, to increase the transparency of the decision-making process at the EU level, because still too many decisions are taken behind closed doors. And we also believe, so one of the idea of this report is also that technologies could play a key role in that, in making EU institutions more transparent. And last but not least, I think that it's very important for EU institutions, but also beyond that for the civil society, to support the emergence of pan-European movements. So not only to operate at the national level, but trying to connect, to create connections with movements across Europe, to support cross-border initiatives. And here, it's one of the difficulties that our program is also experiencing, is that we see that most of these movements, of these cross-border initiatives, are limited to high educated people, to people who are already familiar with the EU institutions, with how the EU functions. And I think that if we want to revive EU citizenship, we also have to think about part of the population who doesn't really have access to education and to how the EU institutions work. So I will stop here because I see that we are already running behind schedule. But thank you for your attention. And the report, our publication, is available on our website, so don't hesitate to have a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all the participants in this panel, and please, if you have comments or questions, now is the time. Please.
So I think we will have to speak up because the microphone is not on.
Please speak up while I'm changing.
At the end of the day, so I'm not too sure. I think it was very interesting in terms of civic engagement. And looking at the positive, there is some level of civic engagement, although it seems to me that it's not directly to the EU institution, and maybe in some member states, it's through addressing national governments that people are expressing themselves. But I think bottom line, there was some research done by the Electoral Commission in the UK, which looked at ethnic minorities and why ethnic minorities didn't have the high level of civic engagement. And something was quite interesting, and especially in terms of participating in election. And it seems that one of the obstacles was the fact that people believe, especially from ethnic minority, that they had no role to play and that their participation didn't matter because they had no influence in decision making. So yes, we can look at different ways of engaging with EU citizens through online media, but bottom line, there needs to be a clear message that they can influence Brussels. Try, but you've got to tell them, look, this is a two-way relationship. Engagement is a two-way, and we can try and get more people to engage, but you need that comeback.
Yeah, people are. I would agree with that. People are not interested in discussing. They're interested in having an impact. And if they see that their efforts are leading nowhere, of course, that's the end of all the efforts. Oh, it does sound. It's the reality. Yeah.
Any more questions?
Or comments from the
comments? No more comments?
Okay, then I would like to invite Asia Kavrakova to say a few words at the end of this long day, and we can move on to the more visual and attractive part of the conference.
I'm very thankful to all of you for participating. I was sharing with a colleague that I'm always so happy since I'm in Brussels here for 4 years already to see people, so many people in the room at the end of the day. I don't know whether Petko will agree with me, but in Bulgaria this could never happen. All the events that we have them and we were organizing, we organized them for 3 hours before the lunch break. After the lunch break, you end up with 2 or 3 people. So I really do want to believe that actually it's really so interesting, the topic and everything that you're still here because of it. I also think, again, that it's maybe a question of culture. Having said that, we have had of civic engagement culture. Having said that, I mean, I have been listening very carefully the entire day because we have very many very interesting but very diverse and different interventions. So, I mean, the question all the time on the back of my mind was, okay, but what is the lowest common denominator of everything that we are debating here? And how does it relate with this broad and maybe vague concept of European citizenship? And then I have to admit that now, like a couple of minutes before I knew that I have to say some concluding words, it's in a way struck me a bit because I thought, okay, I think we can never succeed in making it work or fully tap the potential benefits and everything if we do not look at European citizenship as actually an ecosystem. It is an ecosystem. There are so many different levels and so many different dots with their particularities that are not only related, they're interdependent. Today we heard a lot, and my understanding is that, okay, even if at the European level does everything perfect, it won't be enough if the member states do not do their job. And we have witnessed a lot of examples that the European Commission from time to time comes with a very innovative proposal, which after that is watered down by the member states and the council. and it is a reality. But also, I mean, we've heard today that actually there are very important steps that have to be taken at local level. One of our colleagues in the first panel said a mobile citizen have to be welcome when he moves to another country, and have to be engaged if we want the European citizenship to work. Then there are so many also different aspects, starting from the free movement rights, to labor rights, to housing, to healthcare, which are also interrelated. What is the most important thing besides the different components of every ecosystem? In my view, it's what connects all the elements, the energy, the communication. And here I would say this is what we can maybe broadly call the civic engagement. Young people and social entrepreneurship are part of the fuel of this energy that circulates in the ecosystem. So I know that it makes things rather complicated than simple at the end of the day, but I've never been convinced more than no matter what hat we are wearing, we are so interdependent with regard to our actions that the only way in which we can make it work is first if we work together, and second if we really keep each other accountable and responsible.
Thank you, Asia. You have seen already